So hello and welcome. I'm Lee Hopwood, CEO here at the CCMA, and today we're going to be discussing the journey to automation in quality assurance, or QA as many of you will know it. So this discussion is a result of hearing members talk about their approaches to quality, and it's also quite interesting to hear how some smaller contact centres are still doing this very manually. Although I know that that's few and far between, we really are seeing across the industry a real spectrum of what's happening. Now, I'm hoping that you can hear me okay. I see that a question has just come in saying that you can't hear me. Perfect. Thank you so much for just confirming you can hear me. I am delighted. I'm really pleased about that. So what I'm going to be really interested to hear today is from our panelists and also from you guys, where we are on that journey to automating the quality process. And of course, I will be asking the question, is AI having an impact in this part of the contact center? So having this conversation with me today and joining me on screen is Head of Quality Assurance at Vitality, Sean Reynolds. We have the Senior Training and Quality Manager at Dojo, who is Daisy Crouch, and also Rob Wilkinson, who is CX Solutions Consultant from Evaluagent. Welcome to you guys.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Lee. Hi.
Good afternoon. So I always like to see, first of all, I always like to see that people are using the chat. So I am so pleased that you're all confirming you can hear me. Thank you so much. However, I always like to start these sessions getting us all on the same page. Now, it's going to sound like a really, really simple question, but Rob, what do we mean by quality in the contact center? Can you just briefly describe the function, its purpose, just so that we are all on the same page?
Sure. Okay, so I guess there's probably two parts to this answer. The first is a technical kind of response, which would be the team, a function that monitors customer interactions in order to do a bunch of stuff. So whether that's providing agent feedback, feeding into business change and continuous improvement, ensuring compliance, or just driving better customer experiences. That's, I guess, technically what they do. The other version of that answer would be a function that's been on quite a PR trip over the years, and have moved from very much this kind of perception of a big brother function that's just watching what some of the guys are doing on the interactions, through to what's actually feeding into nowadays, a much bigger part of the business, and has a really serious role to play in making sure that the awareness around what contact centers are doing in a business is amplified. So, and they are that voice, very much so, I think.
I love that description, and I love what you said there about the PR journey it's been on, Big Brother. And I'm sure that there will be centres out there that still maybe feel that, but certainly when we were having our briefing conversation and hearing how Sean and Daisy are using quality to really support their contact centre operations, just goes to me, shows me just how far quality has come in terms of such a critical function. So Rob, why is automating quality so important? And I know it saves time, but there's got to be more to it than that.
Sure, yeah, of course. And yeah, time saving is important, and it definitely can achieve that. However, I think you're right, there is more to it. And for me, I'd start with the coverage element. So at the moment, if you're only sampling a very small number of contacts, then that's not the most representative and robust way to do stuff. So by aiming for automation, the first thing that you're going to need to do is get all those contacts from all those channels into one place, so that you've got your kind of foundations laid and ready to go. In doing so, you automatically get like 100% coverage has impact. One way that happens is, if you think about when we introduced 100% call recording 20 years ago, overnight it changed the way things were run. it's the same kind of thing now. Whereas when everybody knows that everything is being monitored in some way, then it enables kind of different behaviours and automatically drives improvement just by being kind of there and switched on. So that's key. I think that it then in turn enables you to like go more compliant, because obviously if you're looking at everything that's happening, you're in a better position if you think about vulnerable customers or consumer duty side of things. Looking at everything is really important to be making sure that you are meeting your regulatory requirements. Then agent buy-in is something that's really a side effect of going down the automation route, because if you've got that more robust, comprehensive and representative volume of contacts that you're looking at, then they're more buying into that than 5, maybe 10 scores a month, where they can get a lot more. And also, of course, you remove some of the bias when you bring in automation, which again, it's no longer the analyst that doesn't like me that scored my calls, or I didn't get a drink at the Christmas party that's causing my scores to go down. It's actually more robust than that. And just to talk about the point in time reduction, that time saving, it isn't. We should remember that it's what you do with that time when you've saved it that's important. So, and that for me, it's all about the agents. It's all about coaching them. And that's where the time should be reinvested. And I think that is where you get the biggest improvements and the biggest bang for your buck.
And I guess that through that process, there is, like you say, 20 years ago was a step change in that actually suddenly you can now record 100% of your calls. There's obviously an analysis that comes with that. What is the optimum point for automation? Because can you go too far? Can you automate too much so that it becomes less human?
Definitely. And I think, yeah, if we think about this evolution of QA that we've seen happen, that's continuing. And I think right now, we are very much in a place where it's the technology is catching up. But for once, QA is getting some of the tech in contact centers. It's always other people who benefit from that. It's now is the time. And I think that's only going to spur on and fast forward this evolution of QA. I think for me, you're right that some people are trying to run before they can walk. We'll come on to that in a bit, I'm sure. But the sweet spot, you've got kind of what I see as, if you look at the short to medium term, where is this going to lead to? I think QA and insights is going to be a hybrid function, and we kind of touched on it already, getting there. But when you consider the power of the automation, how that enables QA to be feeding into insights in a more powerful way, I think that's definitely something that's starting to happen. And I think that's the kind of the natural progression of the automation in QA. And I think if you're looking at aspirationally, if you look at where I think, and I'm hoping that I'm not speaking for the guys in the room today, they'll certainly tell me if I get this wrong or not. But I think if you speak to those aspirational leaders, the people who get it, who see where this is going, they're going to talk around real time. They're going to talk around predictive stuff. They're going to talk around personalized everything, and it'll all be at scale. And I think that is where the ambitious aspirational leaders are looking. Not there yet. It's a journey we need to go on, and there's a lot that can happen between now and then. But the fact that you can see where this is all leading is, I think, it's really interesting times.
No, I love that, and actually, we've already got a question in the chat, and it's a question that's come through to us hosts and panelists. And I am going to put this to you, Rob, because I do think it's quite an interesting one. I'm going to, Tom, I am going to shorten it a little. One of the challenges I encountered when trying this at an automated option is the results, i.e. it was great to monitor 100% of calls. However, the automation used in a previous role was only picking up the agent side as opposed to all including the customer response. Rob, what's your view on that in terms of, because there is a data protection, as Tom through his further part of the question talks about, where is that in terms of the development of automating quality? Can you now comfortably pick up the customer side?
Absolutely, yeah. So in the same way that So in the same way that you can listen to the agent, you can listen to the customer, whether that's on a phone call that's been transcribed, or whether that's in a chat or over email. You can separate the two, and we call it speaker separation, is the phrase for that. And it allows you to do loads of stuff, which I'm sure we'll cover today. All the kind of tech that the benefits of doing that. But I think that you mentioned, like, from a data protection piece, one of the concerns around that. Well, the reason that is no longer a concern is that the technology has evolved to the point where it can identify when things like names or postcodes or even like credit card structure detail, number structured details can happen, and then it will be eradicated or redacted from the transcriptions. So speaking about our own tool, the way it works is if it's on a call, then the part of the call where anything that's identified it comes up, it beeps it out on the call. And if in the transcript, again, it overlays it with either the phrase, name of person or credit card details. So you don't lose the context in terms of when you go through the transcriptions and you do your scoring, but you remove any of the kind of personally identifiable information that might be in there. So yeah, totally, it is now not a thing to worry about.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. And so that does lead me to, where are people generally? Rob, you're talking to contact center leaders all the time, quality specialists all the time. Where are you finding people are on this journey generally?
So 6 months ago, everyone was trying to run before they could walk. It was like the gold rush. Everybody was like, we're going to monitor 100% of conversations. We're going to score 100% of conversations. It's all going to be automated. We don't need to have analysts anymore. All this. It was interesting. And thankfully, there's been a period of time where lessons have been learned. Reality's kind of kicked in, and people realise that it's actually not the right way to do things. So yeah, 6 months ago, very different picture today. I think, awareness of the technologies is definitely improved. I think as a result of that, it's now seen as a way to enable QA to be more effective and be more efficient. And we talked about time saving earlier on and how to use that time better. I think that's where now that's where people see the future of QA and the future of the technology to support QA.
Thank you, Rob. By the way, I can see questions coming in. I am going to try and get to them all. If for any reason I don't get to them, for whatever reason, one of the things I do is ask our panelists to answer those questions we don't get to, and then we will publish those on our website. So please do feel free to ask the questions, and we will try to get to them. Daisy, now when we had our conversation, you used the word skeptic, and you said that you are skeptic when it comes to technology. Clearly people through and through. So tell us, where are you on your journey?
Yeah, so I would say I'm a reformed skeptic, historic skeptic. I'm not 100% there, but to Rob's point, I think my skepticism in the past has come from the fact that automating quality, my experience of that in previous roles is that the business goes amazing. I can go from 3% to 100%, and I can get rid of my quality function tomorrow, and I'm going to save a bunch of money in doing so. And that like silver bullet is not the reality, and that's kind of where my skepticism in the past has come from. It's not the tech wasn't quite there. Again, to Rob's point, there's been so much change in terms of people's awareness of what the technology can and can't do, and what it will and won't give you, and that's what's reforming my skepticism, I'll be honest. But for me personally, we're early on in our journey because we're trying to walk before we run with it. And taking the time to really consider what it is that we want to get out of it. So again, Rob talked about quality and insights being like a hybrid function, and that's something that will bring real value to the business. And I'm really keen that we have mapped that before we go into it, so that we don't end up with all of this information, all of this data, and then in rabbit holes for months trying to figure out what we want to do with it and who are we going to share it with and what kind of benefit are we going to get, or opening the doors too early and having lots of interest from the business and trying to scrabble to find where our priorities should lie. So we're in the process at the moment of mapping what we want that to look like, what our categories will look like, the kinds of things that we're going to go after, and actually replicating it manually, like how we would structure it to be automated. We're replicating manually to make sure that the output that we're getting from a data point perspective matches what we would want to be able to share with the business. So we're kind of doing it backwards, I guess. We're saying this is what we want to see, and let's work backwards and build it manually, whilst ensuring that that can be replicated into the technology that we are working with. So we're taking a slow but steady approach, and also that's allowing our contact center to buy in, I guess. So we've focused on automating other aspects of our contact center work, things like call summarization and categorization and things like that, which are making our advisors' lives easier. So they're already bought into the technological enhancement, so that when we start to introduce it from a qualitative perspective, we've kind of removed that layer of, what do you mean it's a robot? What do you mean that it's not an actual person? They're already bought in. They understand how it can make their lives easier on a day-to-day. So we're not facing that immediate kind of challenge from our front lines.
Love that. And you talked about the quite clearly, you are making sure that you're walking before you run. Turning to one of the questions that's come through, how are you doing that? How are you training and upskilling your people in order to go on that journey? You talked about going to the point of using the data and insights and how you were going to use that. How are you changing the structure of that team or building that team to enable you to do that?
So we've very much started with what we want the purpose of the function to be moving forward. So we've done a lot of education in my areas around the difference between this kind of historic approach to quality being line items, check boxes. Have we done this? Yes, no, we have, we haven't. And it's an individual piece of feedback for an individual person that will help them improve solely. And we've done a lot of work to kind of bring my teams into more of a thought process around where can we have bigger impact. So rather than a person in isolation seeing an improvement on their one interaction, what about if we could say 50% of our contact center have a challenge in this little space, and we want to go after that whole 50% in one go. So we're restructuring my teams to be less focused on the individual pieces of where we can have small change and affect small bits and pieces, and to start thinking about where are there big challenges in the contact center, and if we were going to tackle them today, how could we do that? What are we missing that is stopping us from being able to do that? And my teams are then answering with things like, well, we don't have 100% coverage, so we don't know that, and it's we don't have enough people to listen to enough interactions, and etc. So they're the ones telling me that we need the technology to solve the problem. So they're kind of teaching themselves and restructuring themselves, changing their own mindsets. And that's the way that we've been approaching it. Again, I talked there about it's important to have the frontline buy-in, but I equally do not want any of my teams, to Rob's earlier point, to feel as though that means that their job is now at risk or going to change, or that we don't need the people aspect anymore. So yeah, I've very much been focused on restructuring, and we've been doing a lot of training and learning around data and how you analyze data, what you do with it, how you present it, and who you present it to at what point. So we've shifted from this like one-on-one relationship with our frontline that my performance coaches and QAs have had historically, to more of a, now you have a relationship with the ops manager for 70 of those people, and you're going to talk to them about every part of their area, and it's like elevating their role.
Yes, love that. Thank you so much, Daisy. Sean, I'm going to bring you into the conversation, because at Vitality as a brand has a quite an innovative approach to it. And you described to me the other week that it's a brand that likes to push boundaries. Where are you on that journey to automation? And I know we've got a lot of questions that come in. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to read those as you were listening to Daisy, and maybe Daisy, please do get a chance to have a look at some of those questions and we can build them into answers in a moment. But Sean, where are you at Vitality in your journey to automation for QA?
Yeah, I think there's a few things in there, Lisa. I think a couple of points that were made. I think, you know, I've been reading some of the questions, and there's some points I'd take out of it. And the technology is here, AI is here to stay. I think we all know that. And I don't think that personally the role of AI will replace QA, the QA role, the agent themselves. I feel that, however, if you don't keep up with the technology and you don't understand how to work with it and augment that technology, then you'll be replaced by someone that can do that, because the world is evolving. And to your question, Lee, we've gone on, you know, we're a bit further down the journey than Daisy, and we've had automated QA in place for 3-4 years. But when we implemented that, you know, we're talking pre-COVID, we're talking pre-Consumer Duty, and the world has fundamentally changed, and customer appetite and customer demand has fundamentally changed. So we had a very kind of rigid, structured, scripted kind of aspect of our speech, and it's saying the right thing at the right time and asking the right question. And there was a very, you know, it was very good for that. However, we've seen a lot of kind of digital adoption, and we all know the industry is moving towards digital adoption and self-serve and things like that. And therefore, a lot of those kind of low value demand queries are being pushed online. So it's not there anymore. So we've had to go back to kind of basics to an extent and revamp and relook at what our approach is and how we kind of, as I said, how we augment against that technology. And we've rewritten a lot of that. And we've seen that the automated QA can highlight instances and areas that we need to go and do a deep dive in. But as I said, we need to work with that, and we still need to do a huge portion of work is manual QA, because there's a subjective element to that. And it's about gaining the insight from the automation and then overlaying that with a kind of human aspect and a subjective assessment of what's good and an assessment of the customer outcome.
Thank you. And one of the things we talked about when we were preparing for today was really pulling out some of those use cases of where technology is really making a difference. And Sean, if I can come to you first, where is that automation? Where have you found the biggest returns in using automation for where you are in your journey?
Yeah, sure. I think a good example is probably a recent review we've done into a deep dive into vulnerable customers. So we used to, you know, vulnerable customers is not a new subject. Everyone on this call is going to know that, but we used to kind of do a review and a designated review into that. But it was based on the fact that we had to take our sample from something. So we were looking at where the vulnerability flag had been ticked to say, right, now let's go and sample those calls and those kind of customer interactions. But by definition, we were never finding anything in that where the vulnerability hadn't been logged or acknowledged, because it already had been. So we've flipped that on its head, and we're using speech analytics now for that. And where a vulnerability kind of trigger word is used, we're then going and doing a deep dive into that and assessing that. And that's seeing it from a completely different lens and showing us that, okay, their vulnerability hasn't been acknowledged, or even if it has been acknowledged and they've handled the customer very well, they've not logged it on the system. So it's providing a totally different kind of view on that, and a really kind of insightful bit of analysis that we've been able to provide onto that.
And how do you get that accuracy in speech analytics? It's one of the questions that's come on the screen here. How do you get that level of accuracy?
It's a really good question. I think that, I mean, one of the key things we've had is, I can't remember the numbers. We had over 100. Well, I had over 15,000 hits on the speech analytics system when we did it over a quarterly month period, and we had to listen to about 100 calls before we got to the right. A decent enough sample of calls we were actually able to assess, because a good example is obviously the Vitality brand is associated with an Apple Watch, and we were getting customers calling in saying the word died. So the speech analytics system is going, oh, a vulnerability here, a potential vulnerability, go listen to it. But they're actually saying my Apple Watch has died. Not got it on, but yeah, my Apple Watch has died, which is obviously not indicative of anything vulnerability. So we've kind of built it in a way to say that it's evolving, and the way we're building is evolving, and we're putting in things like, well, if the word Apple Watch precedes died, then we don't need to see that. That's not relevant to our sample. And that's how we're kind of evolving and building out and making it more fit for purpose.
Thank you. Daisy, I'm going to ask you the same question, but around the use cases. Where are you using automation more so? But first, I'm going to try and capture a few questions that have come in on the chat around getting that balance between people and automation. How do you find that right place? So how can we make sure we don't lose the human element of checking when using automation? And where was the other one? How do you get the balance right when it comes to automation and most effectively using the human QA team? So Daisy, two questions there, if you like. One around how do you get that balance with humans, and also use cases of where you are actually using QA to make a real difference.
So in terms of balance, I think this depends on how you are structuring your quality model, and you need to be clear on what it is that you want to achieve from the purely automated perspective. How are you going to use that? What are you going to use it for? Versus where the human element is required, where you need to do that next level and go further into it. So, for example, automation works really well for things like DPA, GDPR type things, where it's just a simple, yes, that has happened based on set criteria. Great, 100% of them, we can tell you, you can tell me if that's right or wrong, and that's something that can run in the background. What you need to do is structure your quality model in a way where you know what are the things that you want to dive into on a deeper level. So vulnerable customers is a good example of that. Like, the automation can flag the things to you. You need your model to then be set up in a way that you can go, okay, these are all of the spaces where vulnerability is being talked about or assessed, and I want to understand X, Y, and Z, and only a human can do that. And you set yourself up that way, so you know that you're going to get X amount of information at a surface level point from the automation. And that's great for being able to share to business and snapshot views of what's happening and things like that. That's amazing. But you need to understand which things do you want more and a deeper level of understanding about, and those are the things that you focus your human element on, right? And they might change. That might not be the same quarter on quarter or month on month. You can target, and that's the beauty of the automation, is that it will help you understand where you should be targeting and focusing your attention. And that's where your human element comes in. Let the tech identify the challenge areas for you, and then focus your people on those challenges, understanding them, breaking them down, and sharing the plan for how you're going to solve that.
Nice, thank you. And one of the questions that's actually in here, and Daisy, you touched on it, so I'm going to stay with you on this question, is around the regulatory requirements and getting that. So the question is, how do you balance regulatory requirements versus pitch and tone, or tone of voice, to your automated QA reviews? Daisy.
Again, I think this comes down to structure. Like, personally, we view it as different things. So there are aspects of a conversation or a chat, phone call, whatever it is, however your contact center is running, that are regulatory, and that sits in one box for me. That is a thing that you are looking at, is an aspect of your model. And then other things like pitch and tone and the way you interact with the customer, that's a different part from my perspective. If you allow yourself to view things in different kind of pots when you come to automating it, it becomes easier. It's less about, these days, I've got one form or 70 forms or 85 forms or hundreds of them, and there is loads of line items, and I'm going to capture everything about that one interaction in one go. And it's now more about, I'm going to look at lots of different things. I've got this pot, which is about regulatory stuff. And then I have this other pot, which is more around the soft skill and the interactive piece and the customer sentiment. And I might have another pot that is focused on a new product launch that's happened, and I want to understand what customers are talking about there. It's streams of information now, rather than one whole form or piece that you need to think about covering everything all in one go.
Lovely, thank you. Although you did very well at covering a lot of questions in one go there. So thank you for that. But Sean, this being able to check sentiment is something that you guys are doing at Vitality, isn't it?
Yeah, so I was going to add to some of Daisy's answers there. So I agree with them. They're great points. I think that the other thing that is very important to us, and the kind of challenge that we've had is to, and I think we made a point around it earlier, but there does still need to be, in my opinion, an element of kind of structure and a certain set amount of QA that's completed per person. Because you need to be able to, from a performance management perspective and a bonus and a remuneration perspective, we need to feed into that. So there's absolutely still a place for a certain set amount of kind of interactions to be assessed by a manual, kind of typical legacy QA assessment by a person. Because of exactly that, there's subjectivity that needs to be considered. And a lot of those things are still very, very relevant. And the challenge is, how do you utilize your resource so you can, as I said earlier, how you can complement the technology and how you can kind of change the approach. And we've gone for what is essentially a bit of a risk-based model to say that we can commit to a set amount per month per person, which is technically less than the kind of 4 a month model that's the widely recognized one. But if we risk-base that and say, look, if there's underperformance in those areas, we can increase that back to the 4 a month. So we're not actually reducing what the current set amount is. But also, therefore, that frees up some resource for us to go and do those good deep dives that Daisy's been talking about from the speech analytics system. So you're being a bit more kind of tactical and a bit more kind of mindful of what you do with your resource, rather than just slogging away 4 per agent per month, never really getting any kind of, you know, we're dealing with hundreds of calls a month per day per agent, and 1 a week is barely touching the sides. So it's about kind of using the speech analytics, using the manual approach, and doing the deep dive and doing everything in a complementary way. And that's kind of the challenge, and what we've managed to, beginning to manage to really kind of get the right level of oversight on.
Thank you. And Sean, I am going to ask you one of the questions that's come through. On average, what percentage of time savings have you seen in QA's current evaluation time as a result of automation? Where will you get, how much time is being saved, and where are the other ROI elements, I guess?
Yeah, it's hard to quantify the actual time saving because, believe it or not, you know, to Daisy's much earlier point, it wasn't a case of, right, let's go and purchase this speech analytics system, remove the FTE, the FTE in QA, and that funds itself. We've actually, ironically, got a bigger QA team than we did have 3 years ago when we first procured the tech. But that's because the ROI is in different places. It's to complement that approach, and that's what I've been talking about in terms of kind of doing those deep dives. You know, my earlier example around vulnerability, we've reviewed 30 cases over the last month that we wouldn't have even seen from manual QA, because we wouldn't have, you know, we may have picked it out by luck of the draw on the kind of manual BAU QA that we're doing, and obviously we've got vulnerability checks in that BAU scorecard. But those 30 cases where the vulnerability wasn't acknowledged, we simply wouldn't have found, and therefore we've been able to identify those vulnerable customers and remediate that, and either get back in contact with them or mark them as vulnerable. So the next agent that deals with that customer, because at the time when they were being dealt with, they may have been okay. They may have done some vulnerability kind of buzzwords, for want of a better term, but they may have been a good place. But now that we're able to do that, we're able to give the next agent that kind of awareness and a preemptive approach to go, okay, right, there is a potential that I need to adapt my approach here. It's not saying this, do that, not do that. And that's where the kind of, where I'm seeing the value and what I believe is the return on investment from the technology.
And Sean, I am going to ask you, I'm going to try and paraphrase what's quite a long question. Where from someone that's in financial services, so similar, I guess, to Vitality, and in a regulatory market, and those things are making it very difficult to extend the benefit or create additional value up and beyond the time saving gained from automating the process. Vulnerable customers, yes, greater oversight is valuable, but it would be great if auto, in fact, it's probably more of a statement. It would be great if auto QA could play more of a role in complex areas, such as articulating product differentiation, which I guess, Daisy, you touched on a little bit earlier as well.
Yeah, I think that, and that ultimately is where kind of a point we made earlier, but where the AI is evolving, and we can talk about real-time speech analytics. We aren't in that space yet, but it's definitely an aspirational thing to do. Rob, you'll be able to kind of speak about this in terms of the evaluation product, no doubt. But you know, if the real-time speech analytics is transcribing what's happening to the call in that moment, it can prompt the agent with the right kind of level of information. It can link to your knowledge base, and it can say that the customers just use a vulnerability word. I don't want to hark back to the same example, but it's pertinent. You know, they've just talked about potential vulnerability. Here's the knowledge article on vulnerability, or they've just used a kind of complaint trigger word. Here's the relevant article on that, or they've just asked about, you know, what's the new product you've got in XYZ. Here's the article on that, and it can prompt it at real time. So it's a much better customer experience. It's a better customer outcome. It's a lot more streamlined, and ultimately it helps the agent do the better job, and they're getting a better kind of agent experience from that and employee experience.
Thank you. I am going to move on to AI. It is littered throughout all the questions, or quite a few of the questions that we're seeing coming through. So Rob, of course, I'm going to start with you. You're on the technology side of things. How is generative AI, so we obviously see AI in a number of different forms, but how is generative AI making a difference to what's possible? And maybe you can lean into some of the questions that have been asked in the chat and the Q&A in the process.
So I think it's a super fast space. Things change every single month, I think it feels like. And I think some of the examples that Daisy and Sean have given are great examples of people who are actually doing it, having learned some lessons, who are kind of going down that co-pilot approach that we talked about. The fact that it's a harmony thing, it's not all or nothing, it's not one size fits all. I think from an AI piece, it's really it already is super great at doing repetitive, low value, repeat tasks that are kind of high volume, less value add, that you can then remove that time from a human from doing, and give it over to human oversight for whether it's a deep dive or simply just something that you can't automate, you know, because you can't check whether a CRM was, you know, filled incorrectly after a call in a QA piece of software, because you know, that's what a human needs to look at. There's certain nuances that a human has to always get involved with. Certainly, I've not seen anything that's telling me that that's going to go away, not soon anyway. Who knows what's down the road? But I think the key thing to remember with this is that there are different types of AI, and there's different brands of AI. And in the same way that we want to have a harmony between tech and people still, it's really important to focus on getting the right tech for the jobs you're trying to get it to do. So different brands and different types of AI will be very good at delivering. So conversational intelligence has been mentioned. That's one part of it. Transcriptions is another part of it. These jobs are all done by different types of AI, and there are different brands of those AI that are better than each other at doing certain things. So it's not like today there is an AI will do all that stuff great for you, because it doesn't work like that. There's several different ones that need to be kind of used for them. So you need to look at that from the jobs that you want to replace with AI, and you need to look at the tools that are best fit for your unique requirements. And I think the best thing that I could suggest anyone does when they're looking at a solution in this space is look for something that's AI agnostic, because this space moves so fast. You don't know that you're not going to be buying tech that's going to be out of date within 6 months. So if you can get a solution that uses all different tech and replaces it with stuff that comes through in the future, that's going to really future-proof what you're doing. So I think from that angle, that's probably key from an AI piece.
That's interesting, and actually, I've got a funny feeling you might be able to answer this next question quite nicely. How much technical support is required when you're using AI for QA? Do you rely on your provider? Do you need lots of skills in-house to be able to set it up? How does that all work?
So again, there's going to be two sides to this answer. So there's the AI that's doing the more repetitive stuff that we talked about there. That's easy. It's already advanced enough now you can rely on it. You can plug it in. Conversational intelligence is a great example of that. There's lots of really strong conversational intelligence tools out there, and do a really good job kind of putting a lens over a large volume of stuff and saying these things are or aren't there on all those things. And that's one part of it. The next part of it is certainly less plug and play, which is the Gen AI side of things, where you need to get into the prompting side of stuff and you need to understand that. I genuinely believe there's going to be new job roles advertised in the not too distant future of prompt writing. It's going to be like coding. There will be people who are really, really good at it and will do it for a living because it isn't the most straightforward thing to do. So when it comes to that side of things, and with this, you're going to be looking to introduce Gen AI into a scorecard or into your QA when you're looking at things that can be maybe a bit nuanced and quite specific, but that you don't want to use a really kind of restricted logic-based text analytics type of approach. So you do need something that thinks outside the box and grows and learns. So I think at that point, when you're doing stuff like that, and it's worth not scaring everybody. This is like 5% of people are fully on this part of things. Yeah, it's still dead early, but it is definitely where things are going. And at that point, you absolutely need to have experts in the room. So the people that are supporting you with not just training on how to use the tool, but ongoing support with the tool need to have those skills, need to have that kind of knowledge there, and also need to be reactive with you because it's evolving, it's changing. As the AIs change, the way you prompt changes. So it's not standing still, and it is never going to stand still because of the very nature of that it is machine learning and it is evolving. That you've got to have people who can keep the finger on the pulse because that's not your job, and they support you in doing that part of it. That's what I'd say to that.
Thank you, Rob. In a moment, Rob, I'm going to come back to you and ask you what steps do you recommend that people take on their journey to automation. I'll come back to you in a moment, but first I want to come back to you, Sean. When you're seeing AI coming into the mix, how are you using AI, or how are you seeing AI, and what kind of impact is that having on your QA team?
Yeah, I would say that I'm far from an AI expert. So to Rob's kind of points there, hell, I'm probably not even a QA expert, let alone AI expert. But my earlier point around kind of learning about the technology and utilizing it, as I said earlier, it's not going to go away. So to be at the forefront, or to be at the kind of involved in it, and to understand that there is a need for it and how you work with it, I would say is definitely the answer to that. And sorry, Rob, I don't want to dump that on you, but I don't really know kind of in terms of the idiosyncrasies on that, the AI side of things that you'll be able to feel better than I.
I think when it comes to prompting, that's the key. It's understanding how prompts are structured and how they can be used in different ways. It's all about testing as well. So you've got to have an opportunity within your solution to be able to build those prompts out, test those prompts out, and run them across an array of different conversations in the first instance to see how they're working or not, as the case may be, and it becomes immediately it's something that you can then iterate and improve from the testing angle. But then it's as you live it launch over a large volume of conversations that you're going to be QAing, then it's the reiterative improvements that you constantly make, and that'll never stop really. You're always going to need to go in and keep an eye on things, and again, just to go back to the kind of, as the AI evolves and as prompts change, you're learning and your knowledge needs to as well.
Yeah, sorry, I know I threw that at you, Rob, but to take it back a little bit to kind of help you, I think that exactly that. We've got dedicated resource that manages the speech platform, and we've still got dedicated resource that is responsible for QA. And I think the prompts and the using it, and that's how we garner the insight, and that's what we do with it. And it's our role in the journey to take that insight, to be involved in the journey, to feed into it, because ultimately we know what we're checking and we know what we can automate, and we know what the kind of the detail of those calls and those assessments that are required to be assessed against, and we feed into that model and make sure that it's still fit for purpose. And the constant evolving approach we take with it is definitely the best way forward, I think. And then to take that insight and to make sure it gets to the right areas, if it goes to continuous improvement teams, if it goes to operational teams, and then work with the business to actually kind of help deliver that change and feed into that change and support it. And that's another kind of use case for the technology and how we're getting benefit from it.
And it leans directly into what we were talking about at the UK National Contact Centre Conference earlier in September. Earlier this month, was just the amount of value that we've got, and it feels like the QA team is the team that is finding that insight and is in a position to make a difference elsewhere. But Daisy, you said right at the top of I suggested that right at the top of the conversation that you're a bit of a skeptic, maybe reformed skeptic. How do you feel about AI coming into QA? Is that scaring you? And also on the assumption, given that you just shook your head, it's not completely scaring you. How are your teams feeling about it? I loved hearing Sean say, actually, our QA team is bigger now than it was. And I'm hearing a lot more about how AI across the contact center is potentially creating new roles, more roles, not necessarily, certainly not replacing, but certainly creating new roles. How are you looking after your people? How are you working with your colleagues in the contact center to protect that talent?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I was very emphatic in my shaking of my head there. It's not scary as long as you understand that this is not about replacing people, it's about reinvesting what you're saving. So AI is taking away some of the repetitive, the things that, to Rob's point, it's great at loads of stuff that people don't like doing. People don't like leaving notes after calls. People don't like categorizing the conversation they've just had. People don't like listening to a bunch of calls and ascertaining whether or not GPA was passed in that. Like, that is not the fun part of most of these jobs. And the technology is taking away the requirement for those things to be done manually and replacing it with more complex things that people can focus on. There's space for upskilling, cross-skilling, learning new things. And to your point, it's creating new roles. Yeah. So people are learning new things, new skills, and moving into new roles, new functions that didn't exist previously. And as long as that is the way you are approaching it, then I'm actually finding my teams aren't scared of it. They're excited about it because there is an opportunity for them to learn a new skill and focus on less on the things that they tell me they would love to never have to do ever again, and more on the things that they are interested in. And it presents more of an opportunity for them to be part of the return on investment, is what I'm finding as well, where I talked earlier about you're looking at the whole contact center performance rather than one individual's performance. So now when we say things like, a space that we've seen this is around like churn and customer retention, and you're looking at how you interact with your customers and what's a successful retention conversation versus an unsuccessful retention conversation en masse, what phrases are being used more frequently, successfully, etc. And you can take all of that, feeding into your coaching program, and have mass effect on the contact center's performance against that metric. And then the people in my teams have done that. They feel as though they can take that as a return on investment that they have contributed to, rather than one person that they have helped go from X to Y from a KPI perspective. It's now this whole contact center has improved by 10%, and I have been part of that. I have helped achieve that. So I'm really seeing the like self-worth and value in a business context of my teams is growing and changing. They're more confidently coming into conversations and saying, I have done X, Y, and Z. This is the improvement the business has seen from what I have done, and this is my role in it. It's less murky, and people are more clear and confident on how they can impact across the contact center, which is an amazing thing to see happen. So I've actually found it quite positive. And across the contact centers, I think that the thing with AI is that if you're only thinking about it in one place for one specific use case, that doesn't help get people on board at all. And you have to really think about, to Rob's point, what do you want it to do? What are you trying to replace or enhance or whatever it is for your specific needs in your business? and then you bring everyone on board with you. You get people involved in the testing process. You create champions first, and you get them on board, and then you use those people for the next thing that you want to roll out and test and learn, and you grow from that. And it's then not a fear. It's people are excited about the fact that you're automating another part of their role, because that they know that means in a couple of weeks' time we're going to be going out and going, anyone want to learn something new? And that cycle goes round and round and round, and because it's constantly changing and there's new iterations and you're trying to keep on top of it, there is always something new to learn. And even in little things, people not having to write emails manually anymore, like it's taking that bit away, and we're really seeing a lot of that from a DEI perspective. Especially, we've had some amazing conversations recently from people who have said to me, like, it was stressful for me to have to write everything from scratch previously, because that's not a strength for me. And now I don't have to worry about that. All I have to worry about is how I interact with the person that I'm speaking to on the phone or by web chat or whatever it might be. So it's alleviating pressures, and like, it's a positive change, it's a positive shift.
Love it. I love everything you said there, in that the impact it's having on the people, and the empowerment and the confidence. Love all of that. Rob, I'm going to ask you, and in a moment, Sean and Daisy, I'm going to come back to finish with your top tips, your top piece of advice for anyone going through this journey of automation. But first, Rob, what are the steps to get us to automation?
Okay, so the first thing I'd encourage anyone to do is do a very honest check-in with yourself, and establish your maturity right now. So assess where you're at on what we would call the maturity curve. So there's kind of 4, I think, loose boxes that you might fall into. So are you still doing spreadsheets and databases? That's okay, but you're going to need to consider moving, probably while you're watching this. Have you got a QA software in place? That's kind of the next maturity level. If you have, the third maturity level is going to be where you're using analytics and automation within that, and driving that. And then I guess the kind of the next level up is where it's all about AI, and it's insights feeding it with the AI working alongside each other, and driving continuous improvement. So there's the understanding where you are at on what you might call the maturity curve is important, because unless you know and you're honest about where you're currently at, you can't plan the journey to where you maybe want to go. You also can't see where you want to go, because you kind of bedded in. So do your maturity assessment, figure out where you want to go, and get that plan in place. That's the first thing. Plan to start focusing on the kind of using automation to deliver on 20% of your high value and your high risk conversations that are taking place, to identify those so that your team can get into them and be able to actually have an impact. It's kind of not low hanging fruit, but it's kind of like quick wins, most value, if you like. So target those outliers, not just the 80% of all calls that are dead similar. To do that, you can use conversation intelligence. We've already talked on this, like summarization. It's brilliant. Sentiment is awesome nowadays. Over talk and silence on calls, you can identify when those things are taking place on calls these days. We've introduced dead recently our XMPS, which predicts whether it's going to be a promoter or detractor or a passive. Stuff like that is all out of the box, ready to go, and you should be utilizing it and factoring it in. I think Sean touched on using topics as part of that sort of similar thing. So bespoke stuff for your world, plan to use those to get to whether it's dissatisfaction or complaints or something more specific to your industry. Use topics to look for to create those buckets of 20% again, and that gives you those contacts to go into and start to score. And you need to do it in a hybrid way. We call it blended scorecards. To start with, your ambition should be to use both that whole co-pilot approach, retain human oversight to do the sign up on that and make sure everything is as it should be, and to spot the things that the AI can't spot. And then, factor in that co-pilot approach, because that time, as we touched on at the very beginning of this, is really important. and you then want to turn that into better coaching, tailored, relevant, and timely. So yeah, that would be my kind of process to going through automation.
Thank you so much, Rob. So we've just got a couple of minutes left, and for anyone that has asked a question that we haven't got to, I promise you we will be inviting our panel to answer those questions and come back. We'll publish that on our website and we'll let you know. But back to you, Daisy and Sean. Very quickly, Daisy, what's your big piece of advice for anyone going through this process?
Take the time to figure out what you want to achieve from it, and don't try and do too many things at once. It's okay to start small with one particular thing that you want to see as an output where you can clearly articulate the return on investment and build from that. Don't try and do all of it at once and muddy your waters too much, because the business will buy out from you and then you're in an uphill battle trying to get back on board.
Thank you, Daisy. Sean, what's your advice?
I would say, I'll try and be quick. I would say that build your approach to your scoring in a very collaborative way. I mean, that's kind of what you would do in a QA framework in any way, but you need to understand what's important to the business, what's important to the operation, what can marketing input into your QA score, what can compliance put into it. All these people, they need to be on board and they need to be involved in the journey, and it just lands in a much better way. It can't just be built in an ivory tower by the QA team who think they know all the rules. It needs to be made in a collaborative way. And I would say the other thing would just be to manage people's expectations. So your own team, from the perspective of your job, it may change, it may evolve, but it's certainly not going anywhere. You need to be involved in it and part of it. And then obviously manage people's expectations in terms of those associated with the results. So suddenly you're going to see a score where we were not listening to calls before. So what do we do with that? And make sure that's planned out to make sure that people understand it. There's no immediate panic, and it's how you can then complement and help them kind of improve on that and surface enough information that they can drive the necessary improvements in what you're identifying.
Thank you so much. And Sean, I have a comment that's just come in that I have to read out before I ask you, Rob, what's your big piece of advice? Maybe what's your takeaway? But the comment that's just come in, thank you so much for putting this session on. QA is often overlooked, so I love this session to cover a mix of current and future ways of working with lots of hints and tips. Rob, what's your last piece of advice for our listeners today?
I think, so don't forget about the people throughout this whole process, the people that are on the receiving end of your feedback and the coaching you're going to give them, or the analysts that are, doing the job still, because it's going to evolve. And I think Daisy's a great example of someone who planned for that and trained them properly. And if you miss that bit, it won't work. Just like nothing works unless you've got the people bought in and trained up properly. So I think that's the key for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rob at Evaluation, Sean at Vitality, and Daisy at Dojo. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you everyone for participating. Thanks for all your comments and all your questions. And as I say, we will try and answer any that we missed. Have a fab rest of your day, and we shall see you really soon. Thank you so much. Bye.